This week's Four Questions Journalist Spotlight is brought to you by Leff's Atlanta Media, Atlanta's best journalist database. Subscribe at leffsatlantamedia.com.
Welcome to the next edition of our Four Questions Journalist Spotlight. We are talking with Zoe from Decaturish. Hey, Zoe.
Hey, how are you?
Good. So usually, you know the format here. Usually what we'll do is kind of have a little conversation about who you are, what's fun about you, and talk lots about Decaturish and what it's all about. But tell us first, what is your role at Decaturish? Let's start there.
Yeah, so I'm the assistant editor of Decaturish now, so kind of new since January, but so I'm still doing a lot of my reporting, focusing on Decatur and Avondale Estates and a little bit of DeKalb County when we can, and then also do a lot of work more so behind the scenes, just keeping everybody organized and on task and just trying our best to get to everything we can.
Does your editor take a lot of organizing? Is that a lot of work trying to keep Dan organized?
Yes, it is. But it's gotten better. So we've got our Google Calendar and our Slack, and it's definitely got a lot better over time. But it's not as hard as you might think. But
so you've been almost 5 years at Decaturish between freelance and full time. Is that about right?
Yeah, just about. Yeah, I started freelancing, I think, like fall of 2019, and then I've been just celebrated my 3-year full time anniversary.
And you worked where did you work before that? Because I know you had a couple of gigs before you started with Decaturish.
Yeah, so I'm originally from Iowa, and so I was in my senior year of college interning for another local startup paper at the time, but it was called the Indianola Independent Advocate, and I came in right at the very beginning of them launching, and so that was definitely a fun experience, just getting to cover my college town and the county where that was at back in Iowa. So I did that up until I moved, and then moved down here, and I met up with Dan maybe like a month later. So I started freelancing for him right away. And then, but throughout some of that time, I had freelanced a little bit for like the App and Media Group covering Roswell, a little bit for like the Georgia Voice and a couple other things, I think, here and there. But Decaturish has definitely been the most consistent.
So how did you connect with Dan? Was that just kind of networking and you found him that way, or did you seek him out?
It was kind of a little bit of both. So I had moved down here with one of my best friends. We were roommates in college, and she came down here to go to grad school at Emory. And so she had a family friend down here. So we got connected with her and her husband at the time, and they happened to know Greg Bluestein and his wife, Greg from the AJC. And so I met up with him maybe like 2 weeks after we moved, and just to kind of get a lay of the land. And, you know, he was super kind and offered some advice. And one of the things he had suggested to me while I was job searching was to freelance. And so he had suggested Decaturish and I think maybe the Georgia Voice, but a couple other things along the way. And so I think I had emailed Dan at that time, and you know, Greg was like, hey, like feel free to tell him that I suggested like use my name kind of thing. So, you know, I emailed Dan and was like, hey, like Greg Bluestein suggested I reach out to you. Here's my resume. Here's some clips. And it was kind of a not right now, but maybe later. And then like 2 weeks later, Dan was like, hey, can you cover this meeting? And I was like, absolutely, yes, I will be there.
That's great. So describe for folks what is Decaturish and why is it Decatur-ish? And I guess that would get into kind of the area geographically that you guys cover.
Yeah, so we're a very hyper-local media publication. So we're covering Decatur and then some of the surrounding areas, which is the ish part. So we cover Avondale Estates, Kirkwood, Eastlake, kind of the Atlanta, DeKalb, and then Clarkson, Tucker, and Stone Mountain at the moment. And so that makes up kind of the ish part. And then we try to keep a track of our, you know, county board of commissioners and decide DeKalb and some of those county boards as well. And of course the schools, we do a lot of education reporting as well.
What do you think, you know, kind of looking at your kind of what's most important? What do you guys see as kind of the most important news to be covering for folks in your area?
I think there's kind of a couple different things. So food and development news always does really well for us. People want to know what's opening, what's closing, where they can go get a good taco or burger or whatever it might be. So we do a lot of like restaurant news, a lot of development, things are, you see something being built, people want to know what's going on. And so we try to do a lot of that. And then, but I think our local government coverage also for me is, at least for me, because I love covering the Decatur City Commission and the Avondale City Commission. The local government coverage, I think, is really important as well. We're at a lot of the city council, school board meetings, and half the time more often than not, we're probably the only media publication there. So it's just really rewarding, I think, to be able to give our readers that more in-depth coverage of the government that's closest to them. And then, of course, the elections as well. We take a lot of pride in our elections coverage and doing our voters guide every year.
And the Decatur city government is one thing, but you guys are also DeKalb County,
Mm-hmm.
which is a lot. There's a lot going on in DeKalb County and a lot going on with DeKalb County government for you guys to cover. Do you ever feel like, gosh, there's just so much to cover here between these two cities? How are we going to get all this done?
Oh, absolutely. I think about that probably daily. I've got a list of stories I'm working on right now. It's probably like a list of like 10 different stories that I'm like, have been worked on in some capacity, and I'm just trying to make my way through all of it.
Do you ever feel like you have like in project work, we call it scope creep, where our client says, "Hey, I know we're supposed to do this, but can you just add in this or this or this?" Do you ever feel like, well, this story is just a little bit outside our geographic area, but it's really important, so we should cover it, but gosh, we don't really have enough time, but should we?
Yeah, those things come up from time to time, I think, especially this past week or so covering the Atlanta water main breaks. Midtown Atlanta is not really in our coverage area, but it was also impacting Eastlake and Kirkwood, and a little bit of Oakhurst and Decatur was kind of under that boil advisory too. So I've been writing about water for the last like 6 or 7 days. And so I'm ready to write about something else. But I think the water main breaks for us too are, I think it's important that we can, provide some information. If you've ever been impacted by a water main break, you know that the city or the county or whoever it is doesn't really tell you information. So we try to help as much as we can.
Well, and with the age of the infrastructure, it kind of is a good opportunity to, even though it didn't happen in the city of Decatur, maybe it's a good opportunity to talk to the city of Decatur and say, by the way, how old are your pipes?
Yeah.
And what is your plan to keep your infrastructure in good shape? If the city of Atlanta water pipes are 80 years old, there's a good chance that, Eastlake and Clarkston and pipes in that area are probably, in the same area, right? I mean, I don't know I guess that'd be the question, has the city of Decatur, I guess Decatur is newer in some areas than city of Atlanta, but have they kept up with the infrastructure, and are they replacing older pipes? All good questions, which I'm sure you and Dan are asking the powers that be.
Yeah, I was actually talking to some of our Decatur officials a little bit about it the other day. And so I think for them, I think they maintain stormwater, but I think sewer and water is still DeKalb County, but it's also just as old. So
yeah,
we've seen our fair share of problems in DeKalb County too.
So talk to us a little about kind of the dynamics of Decaturish. Obviously, you guys are publishing some stories on a daily basis. What's kind of what's the flow? Do you have features on a weekly basis, daily? What's the schedule?
We publish for the most part Monday through Friday. I feel like most of it will be, kind of some of that breaking news, whether it's water main breaks or whatever crime news, a lot of our local government coverage as well. And we've been getting a lot of food stories lately too. So we've got a good mix usually throughout the week. And we try to get, two of our more feature-y stories when we can as well.
So if someone has a story idea, how far, obviously if it's hard news, it's hard news, but if it's a kind of a restaurant that's going to be opening or something, how far in advance do you suggest, hey, reach out to me, give me a week or 10 days so we can kind of plan for it a little bit? What's your thought process on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think a week is like you said, a week to 10 days, I think is a good time frame just to give us a chance to, reach out to whoever we need to reach out to. But, I think we've been prioritizing food and development a little bit more lately. So those stories will jump right on. And we've got a very dedicated new freelancer, Tana, who's been covering food and news for us, and she's been doing a fantastic job. But I'd say, week to 10 days, give us a little bit of time. But if you're opening or unfortunately closing, just let us know as soon as possible and we'll get to it as soon as we can.
Yeah. So I know you guys have done a lot of stories around kind of businesses closing in Decatur for various reasons. What do you find are the main drivers that are forcing businesses out of Decatur?
That's a good question because oftentimes we don't always know. Like the Waffle House closed recently and we still don't really know why. But I will say, I think for Decatur and I think probably some of the surrounding areas as well, I think a lot of it is the rent. If they're like leasing their space and just trying to kind of maintain the spaces, and that gets, I think, expensive over time. But oftentimes, I think, though, when a business closes, we don't always get a full reason why. But I know I've definitely heard some business owners kind of complain about the rent prices a little bit.
Yeah. And I know parking is sometimes an issue in Decatur too, right?
Yeah, I think so. I personally think it's not that bad, but I also feel like I know where all the parking spots are.
Well, that's the thing.
Yeah. It's not that bad, but I do think you're right. I think a business with a dedicated parking lot tends to do a lot better than one that doesn't. So I think parking definitely plays a role in that. Yeah,
I mean, I used to go down to Virginia Highlands a lot more. But when they started kind of adding all those paid parking lots, then, it's kind of like, okay, it's not that big a problem, but it's just a little bit of an issue. And if you have a choice between, hey, I'm going to go somewhere where I got to figure out parking or I'm not sure about parking versus somewhere where I know there's free open parking nearby, guess where I'm going to go, right?
Right.
So
Yeah. I'm the same way. Like, I don't necessarily go to like downtown Atlanta for the same reason. Because I'm like, I don't want to figure out where to park. But I know where all the parking is in Decatur. So.
But what is the deal with the Waffle House? I mean, that's
really
just
no idea. It just kind of closed randomly one day.
I mean, that place was always busy every time I went in there, especially, definitely in the mornings and on the weekends when I'd go by, lots of people. But weird things happen, like Taco Mac. Over there, that closed kind of poof unexpectedly too. And I think they said rent a little bit too. I think it was one of their drivers. But then somebody who's at the Benchwarmers moved in there, right?
Yep.
And that's a huge location. I mean, and they got a parking lot.
They do.
Yeah.
Benchwarmers seems to be doing pretty good so far. So.
Yeah. It's a good place. There was one near me. I think it's going to be their local location over by me on Claremont. I think is in the process of being redeveloped, which means knocked down, right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
So, let me remind folks, if you haven't clicked the subscribe button yet, you should do that. If you're watching this on YouTube or whatever platform, click subscribe now and tell your friends about the podcast too. Okay, so what are some topics that you guys are looking at that you that you wanted to be covering kind of coming up in the next few months? Obviously, election is one, right? You got that. What else?
I think over the summer it'll give us some time to the elections, of course, especially with the runoff election coming up in a couple weeks. So we're ready to see kind of the results of that. But the summer, I think, gives us a little bit of time to work on some other projects as well. And I know I've been kicking around a story about, or what probably will end up being a series about affordable housing. And so something that I've learned that I've become passionate about since covering the city of Decatur is affordable housing, or at least just something that's more attainable than, like an average housing price of like $750 or whatever it is.
Right. How is affordable housing defined? Is there a price point?
I think so. I think if it's like truly like affordable housing, it's based on like the area median income. So I think most of the time it's around
Okay.
like 80% of the area median income. And I think there's some rental prices that go along with that. But Decatur's also been doing a lot of work around the missing middle housing. So it's kind of that the in between, the like affordable housing that would be, I guess, defined by like HUD, and then, like your single family house. And so just trying to find those things in between.
Right. Okay. So affordable housing, fall, we have the Decatur Book Festival coming back. So that'll be a good one, right?
Oh yeah, the summer's definitely festival season. So we'll have lots of festivals to cover. And then, yeah, Book Festival, I think, is coming back in October.
I think that's right. I think they moved it off. Well, they skipped last year and moved it off Labor Day weekend, which is probably smart. I mean, who wants to compete with Dragon Con, right?
Yeah, that's a good question.
It's like, let people do both. Although, honestly, I never saw a lack of people going to the Decatur Book Festival.
Oh yeah, it's always very well attended.
I know. I never go down there and think, oh gosh, there'd be more people here if there wasn't for Dragon Con. It's always packed.
Yeah. For sure.
Yeah. Let's see. So what? Okay. So let's jump to the really hard question. So this is the hardest question that I always ask people is, what is the coolest thing about Zoe that people might not know? What's the cool Zoe thing?
I was thinking about that before we jumped on this call, and I was like trying to think of something that people might not know. But I don't know. I mean, I think like work wise anyway, I've been the first full-time hire for Decaturish, and I'm very proud to do that and to work with Dan, and just very proud of our very dedicated team of freelancers. Everybody's doing a lot of great work, and we're slowly but surely growing, and that's exciting. But yeah, I mean, I think most people probably know this. I don't know if it's necessarily cool, but I mean, I'm from Iowa, moved down here. It's been almost 5 years ago, but Decatur also got a new soccer team that I've been very excited about as well. And but I played soccer growing up and played, I think, from the time I was probably like 7 or 8 all the way through college. So I think that's pretty cool.
All right. Okay, so next kind of couple of questions are called the lightning round. So you don't have to give really long answers, but just kind of quick answers. So what's the last book you've read or last podcast you've listened to? And I'll give you the option, either one.
Sounds good. I think I'll go probably last book I read. And I meant to look this up because I don't remember the title of it, but it was about this girl who was 26 when I'm 27. But just kind of trying to figure out her life and wishing things that were different. And there's like a moment where she like finds this like time machine thing and is like, oh, I wish I could go forward into the future. And then she wakes up the next day and is like older and married and has kids. And then it's kind of like she goes back and is like, oh, but I wish I had that time back, when I was in my 20s. And I don't know, it just made me feel a little better about myself and my situation, and feeling like it's okay to not quite have everything figured out in your 20s yet.
That is totally fine. Yeah. Don't people stress themselves about having everything figured out when they're 25 years old, and
right.
is not necessary. All right. A favorite local restaurant?
That's also a good question. Does a coffee shop count as a restaurant? Because
sure,
I'm not dancing all the time in Decatur, but
which one? Dancing Goats?
Dancing Goats, yeah.
Okay.
But Pastries A Go-Go is probably my favorite classic Decatur restaurant.
I haven't been there in a long time. My friend Art Madman Maring keeps telling me we should go to meet up at Pastries A Go-Go. So I will have to. I'll take him up on that. Meet Art, and Zoe, you can join us. I'll make Art buy you breakfast. How about that?
That sounds like a plan.
He's a well paid traffic reporter, so I'm sure he can spring for breakfast. All right. Favorite guilty pleasure?
I do love a good reality TV show from time to time.
Okay. Do you have a favorite show?
Not really at the moment. So try to kind of find a new one to watch.
A variety of things.
Okay. I'll just like click on something random on Netflix.
Sometimes that's a fun thing. I do that with Amazon Radio. I'll put it on, or Amazon Music. I'll put it on the, you know, kind of a randomized function, and it'll play music I've never heard before, which, you know, sometimes is good, and sometimes I'm like, I'm gonna skip that one.
Yeah, same.
Yeah, you know, but sometimes you run across an artist and you're like, wow, I like her. She's really good. And then you go find other work by that artist, and you find out they've got 3 albums and you've never heard of them, but they're really good. All right, favorite local getaway.
You know, that's also a good question. I'm at home most of the time, but I think when I do need somewhere to just get out and not be in my apartment, I really love going to Legacy Park over in Decatur. So maybe not necessarily as much of a getaway, but it's still just a great space to be able to walk around and at least get out of the kind of busyness of life sometimes.
Legacy Park is great. And I feel like it's not, I don't know if I say not well known, but it's never crowded when I'm there. It's not like it's Piedmont Park where there's hordes of people there. And you gotta know to look for the lake. It's kind of, you know, tucked back there. And if you walk around by the little pond, I last time I was there, we saw a bunch of owls kind of hanging around, kind of late morning. So it's a nice place. It does take a little effort to find it, though. All right. Favorite non-work hobby.
More recently, I've been trying to get into gardening a little bit. I live in an apartment, so it's very limited, but I've got a little pot of basil growing on my patio, and it's getting so big, and I'm so excited about it. But
there you go.
Probably that.
That is good. You know, being a home-based business, I tend to have I have a little patio outside my office, and I'll pot a bunch of plants every spring, and you know, just have a little color out there, and you know, some greenery and my bird feeder.
It's nice to have something. And like the other day, I was like, I just need to get up and walk around for a second, and I was like, let me just go water my basil outside and look at my other house plants, and then come back and finish whatever story I was working on.
There you go.
Yeah.
Let's see. Is there anything else about Decaturish that we haven't talked about? Oh, we should talk about how people can find Decaturish, right? Yeah. Where do you find Decaturish?
Yeah. So we're at Decaturish.com is where we publish everything. If you're looking for our election coverage specifically, it's DecaturishVotes.com, and that'll bring you to our page that has all of our election coverage that we've done so far this year. So those are kind of the main 2 things. If you want to subscribe, it's supportmylocalnews.com, I believe. So those are kind of the 3 main ways to find us.
I encourage everyone to click that subscribe and support button for Decaturish. It's a great local publication, kind of, and I live in that area, so it's great to have somebody who's kind of covering local government and local issues on our side of town. It's interesting that, you know, that there's those Eastlake, Clarkston areas, Decatur kind of sort of, but there's a lot of areas on the side of town that they just don't get a lot of coverage, and that's changing. But for a long time, it's just, you know, it's like certain areas, Midtown, downtown, North Side, Cobb County, going out. Those got a lot of coverage, but you know, Decatur, Clarkston, Eastlake, South Atlanta, those areas were not getting, you know, the deserved coverage that they should be getting. So it's good to see that what you and Dan have been doing with that, and we'll see if you guys expand the empire.
Yeah, we're hoping to. So we're trying to kind of, you know, I think focus a little on our coverage area right now and just making sure we're doing the best we can with it. And then, you know, our goal is to expand from there. We'll see what happens next. But I know Dan's longtime goal has been to be the paper for all of DeKalb County. So we'd love to be covering more of the cities and more of the county overall than we are right now. But, you know, it's been fun so far, and I'm out and about in Decatur all the time. And so it's always fun to run into people. And they always tell us, you know, that what they love about Decaturish, and I love hearing those things. So it's always a good time.
Excellent. We've been talking with Zoe from Decaturish. Thank you, Zoe. And as always, you can find our archive of journalist spotlights on YouTube and on Apple Podcasts and Google Podcasts and all those places where you can find podcasts. So you can go. We got a couple hundred of them. So go back. If there's a journalist you think we should talk to, go check in first and see if we've already talked to them. Like Dan the editor. We talked to Dan about 2 years ago, so you can get one with Dan. And as always, if you want to find our database of Atlanta media, go to leffsatlantamedia.com. And Zoe, thank you for your time. Oh, I should say Zoe is going to be on the panel on June 9th for the Atlanta Press Club debate. You're going to be on the panel with the DeKalb County CEO candidates. So she'll be asking that. So you can watch those streaming on GPB.com, or you can watch on GPB TV or on the Atlanta Press Club's channels. So look for that. Again, Zoe, thanks again, and thank you everyone for tuning in.
No problem. Thanks for having me, Mitch.